Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed and we are reading Plato's Phaedo. Last time we had a wonderful chat with our friends in chat about how we are applying what we're learning to our lives, how we can use philosophy to understand the problems we deal with, and of course how we can understand what Socrates is outlining as the art of the logos in order to reach our highest goals. We shared the idea that we should follow our highest vision or our intuition or our feelings, so long as our feelings are aligned with the logos. And we distinguished it from feelings that are aligned with what seems probable or what seems attractive. These are the two key terms that Simius pointed out made the false myths, the false stories about the soul appealing to him. So also, we recognized that within what we're reading, Socrates has pointed out that everything will be within those two extremes. It's unlikely that what we feel is true is going to be completely our problem or our pathologos or the shadow of being. Equally so, it's rare to have our feelings completely aligned with truth, with that which we are seeking in philosophy. Socrates pointed out that, hey, part of the art is being able to make that distinction, being able to judge. And of course, he points out that if we don't use the art of the logos to judge people, we'll be let down by them, especially those we think should be trustworthy, near and dear to us. And equally so, for our soul, the worst condition that we can have is hating or reviling the logos itself. Equally, that comes from trusting the logos without applying the art of the logos. So not only can the art of the logos help us reach our highest goals, it can prevent us from having the worst problems, the worst defects of the souls. And applied to humans, villainy, hating humans. And of course, that will manifest according to whatever power you have. So if you happen to be a billionaire with a hatred of humans, that would play out like an archetypal villain from a story or a movie. Or, the way billionaires are right now, the society we live in. But we're interested in our soul. We need to develop the art of the logos. And part of that is recognizing, hey, between the ideal and worthlessness is where most arguments lie. We need to be able to discern. And of course, if we can do that, that's part of learning the art of the logos. And that's what we are trying to do. This is the best thing, not a bee sting that a bee leaves behind when he dies, but the best thing that Socrates wants to leave to us when he dies. The art of the logos. So we're learning how we can do that. Last time we talked about that's kind of matching Socrates. If he is the ideal hero, we have to match him because he's wanting to pass it on. Of course he does. If this is the ideal of philosophy, then we need to match this because we want to master philosophy. We want to live the best life and die in the best way also. We also talked about if this is the puzzle that the text is giving us, 60% or so, the golden ratio into the drama. This term is introduced, and the greatest stakes. Without this, you have villainy. With this, you have what you need it for. The opposite. Of course, we have to put in the opposite because we are playing the game. He gives us empty spaces for us to fill in. So what's the opposite of villainy? The ideal hero. If you want to be that for the story, then in order to read the Phaedo properly, we also have to match this art of the logos for that reason in order to read. read in an active sense, not passive. It's not dry and dull the way philosophy is often taught. It's a game. It's like the ideal video game, but because it's for our soul. And as we go through, we can recognize certain key elements that we are developing within our soul that match what a video game character might match, or what Harry Potter or what Luke Skywalker might themselves reach in their stages of development. So we could say we are matching the ideal hero's journey by matching the art of the logos. Last time we mentioned that quote from Dr. Pierre Grimes, it is entirely possible to verify for ourselves we are a part of a caring and intelligible universe. That verification is a kind of proof, since it is a way of understanding, not belief, that is based on a realization, an insight, that our mind constantly communicates with us and for our benefit. If there is a kind of communication that the universe is using, it is more than likely the logos, because that's the paradigm of communication. That's what we're on the hunt for, the self-logos. The artful use, of course, will make it beneficial. So if the universe communicates with us, and if our job is to recognize that we live in an intelligent and intelligible, means both understandable and knowable and beneficial universe, then by matching the art of the logos, we're also matching the level of mind of the universe. So if we're interested in spiritual development or levels of enlightenment, to have the consciousness of the universe or the state of being or mind of the universe, we can only do that through matching him. Through likeness do we become like that which we want to achieve. And of course, if we practice that in our lives, we're practicing the virtue, because we've been seeing that the virtues are fundamentally tied to the art of the logos, and the vices can be understood by its absence. Therefore, if we're constantly doing it, that's a meditation, sustained concentration. And so if we sustain our meditation, we can unite with that which we are focusing on. Contemplation. That's the spiritual initiation. Socrates also pointed this out in his doctrine. If we practice dianoia, the kind of understanding tied to the art of the logos, we are being most like noesis, most like the experience of knowing. And we're purifying ourselves by being like it, by matching it until the divine self can and allow us and invite us into that higher stage of being. So you could say, thumbs up, because we want that. So you could say that by matching the art of the logos, we're matching the intelligence of the universe, and by likeness and by contemplation, because we're doing it as much as we can at all times, we are providing ourselves the condition to ourselves match that level of consciousness, the universal soul, some people might call it, the consciousness of the universe. And so if the universe is intelligible and caring, then so too are we. And of course, if we're practicing the art of the logos, by definition, the art of the logos is understandable, involves knowing there is an ideal in being that's necessary for art. There needs to be an ideal, but also necessary for an art is it's beneficial. So of course we would become caring and intelligible ourselves. Last time we also pointed out that dreams, if dreams communicate in a similar way, intelligibly, providentially, beneficially, that we intelligibly and beneficially, therefore bestows a providence, then to understand our dreams in dream analysis, we also have to match the intelligence of dreams by matching its use of the art of the logos. And of course, if this intelligible, beneficial, artful way of being is like the daemon, like the ideal hero, like Socrates needed to read the text, like the universe, like dreams, we could also say, hey, maybe it's like the daemon. the internal voice that communicates the self-logos to us for our benefit. Our inner voice, the quieter one, usually more quiet than the loud one, which is the shadow, which reflects the anti-logos that puts us down. What we sometimes call nowadays the inner critic. So we're matching that. And why is that significant? Because being like a daemon is how Socrates is being described, and what he describes are the sorts of people in the next realm which we want to go to. So if we want to escape the cycles of reincarnation into ignorance, into the physical world, and elevate ourselves to a higher level of incarnation, then that's another reason why we want to match the art of the logos. So lots of reasons why we want to match the art of the logos. All of those good ones, and of course, all of those ones that help us to prevent the negative, prevent villainy, prevent being betrayed by humans, prevent hating humans, and prevent the greatest defect of the soul, according to Socrates, hating and reviling the logos, because that will prevent us from reaching our highest state of being and will cause us to live a life of vice, which will nail our soul to the physical body, affecting our incarnations as well. So big stakes. The most, so of all of the things that are important for a human being, that big list seems to be the top 10, hitting all of the top 10. So really significant. And of course, we would not have seen that immense significance, profound significance, importance for us individually and humanity at large if we were not playing the game, if we were not reading carefully without interpretation, if we were not reading for the sake of being able to be a debate bro, being able to fight other people, being able to troll people because, oh, look how smart we are, we've read this book. Being able to quote them just to support our own prejudices. These are all interpretations. We would not see the greatness that is there to be seen if we weren't doing our best to exercise our reading with excellence, to bring the art of the logos in to our reading. Fortunately, we've been doing that, which makes it a really curious kind of podcast. It's not a podcast based on opinions like most. It's not one that is quick fire, appealing to the TikTok level of attention that most people have. It's one that's careful, reasoned, and the logos is guiding. There's a lot of repetition, not repetition only, but going back and rereading what we've previously read, applying a new level of understanding, applying it to our lives, demonstrating it. So last time we didn't even read the text because we were applying it to our lives and the lives of our friends in chat. So this is part of it. It's not quick fire, quick cuts, Mr. Beast kind of YouTube video. It's the opposite. And of course, it's not based on opinions. It's based on the logos. The logos is guiding this podcast. We are doing our best to match it. So we are the Hercules and Socrates is our Ionius or whoever that guy is, that is the assistant. Or either way, he's helping us to become a hero ourselves. That's what Socrates mentioned earlier. But that logos doesn't come from Socrates. Even Socrates is watching it come from self, is amazed by it, is in wonder of it, is calling it in, is trusting it, is coming to its aid, and so on. So there's, but of course, we mustn't just trust it, we have to trust it with the art of the logos. So that's what makes this podcast different. We are being guided by a level of intelligence and care and knowability. So understandability and knowability, a level of intelligibility. That word means both of those things. Higher than ourselves. So most podcasts are limited by the level of development and the level of problem of the host. You might recognize this yourself. You might have been in a class and you realize, oh, okay, there's only a certain level I can go to, because as soon as I go past there, the teacher gets confused and the teacher likes to be in charge. And the teacher, and of course, one of the problems humans have is that they're not open to new ideas if they're tied to their problem. If their problem is triggered, they will violently and vehemently defend their ignorance if that's what they're used to. That's what it means to be knowing for a lot of people, because they don't know what knowing is, because they're not reading this text. They're using their parents when they were younger, or priests or people on TV who shout angrily, and oh, that must mean that they know. So we have the opposite of what a knower is being portrayed in our world as what knowing is. Just like if you hold your left hand up to a mirror, the right hand goes up. So our world seemingly is a distortion of the real world. To shout and angrily or to punish seems like what somebody who knows acts like. That seems to be what people cosplay as knowers, but it's the opposite. Socrates isn't shouting, Socrates isn't punishing, Socrates isn't hurting, Socrates isn't excluding or gatekeeping. He's doing the opposite of all of those things. So we don't want to be closed-minded in that sense. We want to be open. And if you've ever had a teacher like that, and all of us have, we realize, oh, okay, yeah, I can only go up to here because this is as much as they know. And of course, being a teacher, according to them, means being the knower. So I think there's a quote, an expert is those who are closed to learning anything new for fear of no longer being an expert in that field. And philosophy is rife with that way of being. They get angry when new ideas, not all of them of course, but a lot of people, especially if their job or their fame is tied to their level of knowing, that level of development of where they're at, as well as where they're stuck, their level of problem, dictates how far a lesson can go, how far a student can go. But we do not suffer from that in this podcast, because it's not me hosting. It's not Socrates hosting. It's the Logos. We're doing our best to read and be open and allow ourselves to be puzzled, allow ourselves to be confused, because that allows ourselves to be surprised. Phaedo said that before. He said it was altogether unexpected. The Logos that Socrates used to in response to the counter argument against the immortality of the soul from Simmias and Cebes. And we want to be like that. He was, just to read the text, he had a response to those puzzles that was equally not at all expected, but what most mystified me indeed was first his pleasant, gentle, admirable way in which he received the Logos. Socrates was receiving it. And how keenly he perceived the effect which their Logos affected us. He could see how Simmias and Cebes, mainstream views of the soul were affecting those around him. And how well he healed us. This is a healing art. The art of the Logos is a healing art. Summoned us from our flight and defeat and turned us around. What's that remind us of? To be turned around? Ousia. Self-ousia, we saw, was the essence of all of the beings we want to know and understand in philosophy. Together, examine the Logos. So together we are examining the Logos. That's what Socrates is doing. That's what we're doing. We're receiving the Logos. Together we're examining it, and we're doing so in an open, curious way, not arrogantly attached. Arrogant is a silly word, but not attached to our own personal beliefs, because that makes us a knower. We get to give advice, and everybody wants to cosplay the knower, because we actually seek true knowing. That's why the image of knowing is so powerful to us. That's why our parental figures, giving the appearance of wisdom and beauty, cause a problem that dictates the fate, the course of our lives, unless we wake up to this game and challenge it. Why? Because real truth and beauty is so powerful in itself, and our soul seeks that. It seeks it so much Therefore, we're all philosophers, really. It seeks it so much, and we're all philosophers genuinely, such that the image of it can usurp its power and be a pretender on the throne and cause all our problems in our life. We don't want to be like that, which can be a challenge, especially in philosophy. People into philosophy often, have learned a bit more, have reflected a little bit more, have self-reflected a little bit more than others. So we have an opportunity to be a knower, pass out advice, and that can flatter our ego. So hey, we don't want to be like that. We want to be in an open, curious state. That can be challenging, but that's what we want to be. Socrates is the same way. When he was able to address the harmonia argument, the idea from Cebes that our soul must die after our body dies because the soul is like harmony, Cebes jumped in and said, "You did really well. You were great. You were top, Socrates." And he said, No. Don't be boastful like that." Let's get the exact quote. Don't boast lest some jealousy be set in motion to overturn our destined logos. We must leave these matters to the care for the God, and let us proceed in a Homeric fashion. Let us pierce right through the logos at hand to see if anything accords. So it's not about you, it's not about your ego, it's not about Socrates, it's about the logos. And so be careful not to boast and take ownership of the logos. Pat yourself on the back too hard that you fall over. And that's what we're doing here. Okay? Which, again, one of the questions we've had is what is philosophy and what isn't philosophy? That can go into side B, what philosophy isn't. That aggressive self-back-patting for how clever you are at giving advice. And of course, that's one of the attractive features. It's called Peter's principle. Peter's principle is the idea that people rise to the position in their work of their incompetence. Like if you have a job, you do really well in it, you get promoted. You do really well in it, you get promoted. You're not doing well in that job that you're promoted to, you're not promoted. So you end up stuck in a job that you suck at. Now, philosophically, we have the philosophical Peter's principle that people are attracted to positions where they can play out their problems. They can play the knower. They can give out advice that isn't the dialectic, that isn't the logos. And also, of course, that's where violence comes into. One way of suppressing the self-logos, the self-mind, and the one-self, the triad that we've seen about the self, is violence. It's one way of acting like you're so knowing. Well, I must be knowing if I'm so knowing that I can inflict violence on those who disagree with me. And of course, violence is always bad. I mean, I guess the exception is to stop Hitler or something of that sense. But in a learning environment, it's never good. And one of the ways violence is smuggled in to oppress people is through the idea of punishment. Violence is good sometimes, when you can make them bad. Notice philosophy isn't about making people bad, it's about realizing our fault is a lack of the art of the logos. If a child doesn't know what 2 and 2 is, you don't say that they're bad and whack them, you help them learn the art of math. Same too with humans and our problems. If our problems are caused by the shadow of the logos, or the shadow of the dialectic, causing the shadow of the logos to be the voice that we listen to. And true health and excellence is the actual dialectic, the actual ladder up, and the art of the logos is required to heal this and reach and progress through that. Then if somebody's got a problem, then the rational and the caring and the artful and beneficial thing to do would be not to whack them or make them feel bad about themselves, is to introduce the idea of the art of the logos, and help them learn. Always as a principle. So this is a way where we can go from barbarism based on violence and oppression, snuck in under the guise of sometimes violence actually is beneficial. It makes you good when you're punishing the wicked. We can drop that bullshit and actually become actually beneficial, rational, and artful. Okay, that's where it's smuggled in under the idea of punishment, which is itself smuggled in under the idea of learning. Oh, I punish them because they teaches them a lesson. They're somehow made better. That will allow them to reflect and see the problems that they have, understand the causes of their problems, realize the implications, realize why they thought that way and why it was important that they did think that way, because all problems are a solution that had an application that no longer apply. All problems are solutions that worked at one time, but now no longer are sufficient. So they'll see all of that if I smack them in the face as much as I can, or if I put them in a prison cell. They'll see all that. And they'll also learn the art of the logos to actually learn what is the truth of justice, of beauty. Because that's what we're doing here. That's philosophy. Both of those things. It takes work to understand what beauty itself is, because it has an existence, thumbs up, in being. It requires a mystical experience to confirm your understanding about true beauty, true justice. It requires work. It requires the virtues, the disciplines of virtues. It requires an openness. It requires questions. It requires reading this text the way we're doing. And surely someone will get all that if I just hit them hard enough, says anybody whose thought violence serves a purpose. See how irrational it is if you say it out loud. See how simple it is. All problems are caused by the shadow of truth being justice. In one word, self-ousia, the shadow of self-ousia. That manifests as the pathologos or the sick logos. And what's actually good, so that's our fate, by the way. That's where our problems come from. And what's good is we can call destiny, which is the truth of self-ousia, understood through the logos, applied through the art of the dialectic. Simple. How much of that involves punching? Zero. In fact, punching or making somebody feel bad is actually in line with your problem. You're making the problem worse. So you're being barbaric, irrational, and harmful. Under the guise of artfulness, we make it better. And politically, that's the justification for war and genocide. Hey, we make people better by bombing them, by starving them. And capitalism, we make people better by impoverishing them, by making crime a necessity for them to meet their basic needs. That's how we make them better. Therefore, capitalism is great. Wealth inequality is great. Poverty is great. Bollocks. It's all bullshit. It's all, and the art of the logos and what we're reading, we're able to see why that's nonsense for ourselves. And that's important because it's not just a matter of believing Socrates when he says, oh, this is the cause of our problems. Because someone who's very good at contradicting the logos, someone very charismatic might come along and say, well, actually, wealth inequality is good because it fuels innovation. People are lazy. And if that is attractive, because maybe you grew up and your dad would say, oh, people are lazy, then, or some scientist says, well, I looked at lobsters and lobsters are lazy unless we make them fear starvation. Then they will get to work. Then that nonsense lie argument can seem attractive or probable. That's why we need the art of the logos. Oh, okay. How does that relate to the truth, to the ideal, to the art of the logos? Does actual threat of starvation make people happier and more productive and more further ingenuity? No, it's the opposite. Oh, so they're lying to us. Why are they lying to us? Well, they lack the art of the logos, and therefore they must think there's some good or benefit for themselves in lying to people. Maybe they hate humans because they were let down, because they lacked the art of the logos, and so therefore they lack empathy. Maybe they grew up in a culture which taught them, hey, there is no logos other than the physical logos, where try and get more stuff for you because it's a dog eat dog world out there, because maybe their parents were bastards. Or it's a culture that they grew up in to justify them having slaves, or to be richer than others. There'll be a cause that will speak to not having the art of the logos. See how simple philosophy makes things. Socrates lays it out and says, hey, by the way, those people who contradict the logos and then think that they are the ones who've got it figured out and they are the ones who are wise, the ones who are cosplaying as wise, they'll say three fundamental things. There is no being, there is no reality, there is no sound, firm, good, knowable reality. So there goes metaphysics, there goes wisdom, there goes philosophy. There is no logos. There is no sound, good, firm, universally acceptable paradigm or pattern in the universe that is understandable to all. So there goes understanding. There goes unity of humanity, because understanding doesn't gatekeep. It's open to anyone who wants to learn. It's not dependent on your opinions or beliefs. So there goes understanding. What takes the place? Faith, belief, group think. We think this way, that this person is chosen by God, these people are best, and you can only come to the picnic if you believe in what we believe in. That's religion. Religion can be understood very simply. It's not complicated. The word religion means to be bound by a saving belief. That's it. Some people say, oh, no, there's not a problem with religion. It's the way man uses religion. That's where the problem comes, because obviously, mass genocide and, the Inquisition and lots and lots of terrible, obviously unjust things have been done in the name of religion. People say, oh, no, that's just man corrupting it. It's actually good. Well, no, we don't have to think that. We don't have to believe that opinion. We can look at it. If religion, by definition, is to be bound by belief, then does that necessarily prevent us from something that's a higher cognitive function that isn't belief, understanding? Notice beliefs are based on your, what's attractive to you. Most Muslim children are born to Muslim parents. Most Catholic children are born to Catholic parents. Almost always. So it's not based on truth and learning of the art of the logos. It was picked up before we learnt the art of the logos, before we could have learnt the art of the logos. And as we're seeing, the thing that we do want to verify understanding in truth is knowing which is beyond belief necessarily. So necessarily, by definition, religion is harmful because it prevents you from reaching that which is beyond belief. And it also prevents understanding. And also all of the other implications that follow. Your belief, both my belief, if there's no unity, because you don't have to prove a belief, that's faith. It's just, I happen to like it, it's attractive. Very few people look to the cause. Why is it attractive? When did you learn this stuff about your crazy religion? No, it's good. It makes me virtuous. Actually, if you learn virtue is tied to the logos. Necessarily. It's not a matter of opinion or belief. You don't have to believe this for it to be true. Just like medicine. People have their own beliefs, and that famously causes a lot of problems. People have their own beliefs about medicine without actually understanding it. Same too with politics. Same too with religion. Same too with spirituality. But philosophy, as we're reading, makes it so simple. So in other words, we're harmonizing ourselves by seeing it simply, by unifying the aspects of the soul, unifying our understanding of problems, and not just problems, but how to go from problems to health and health to excellence, unifying it in a simple term, the art of the logos. So, beyond belief. So, and of course, we looked at, we mentioned earlier, all problems were solutions that no longer apply. So this idea of blind, fervent loyalty to belief was a solution to a problem of human evolution before logos. Because this inside cave good, outside cave bad and scary saved us from getting eaten by saber-toothed tigers before we could think about what saber-toothed tigers are. Before we had light, we could make fire and see what happens out in the darkness. So humans are not terrible because of this attractiveness to belief and this tolerance of belief. It's simply a solution that we've outgrown. So applying the dialectic to our evolution, just like we apply it to our soul, we need to reach the next stage. And Socrates is saying that's next stage you have to be in. Simius and Cebes and everybody else here who was just thrown into chaos because somebody used an argument against what we learnt. We learnt that the soul is immortal, but someone just has to use an argument that resonates with our beliefs, our religious beliefs in the text and our religious mythology. Then all of a sudden, I don't know what to believe anymore. You're in chaos. That's what happens with belief. All you gotta do is have some smooth talker who knows the buttons to push. Hey, that's where fascism comes from. You have a leader that acts in a tyrannical way, an unjust way, but is similar enough to the majority of families. If Putin is the kind of tyrant that reflects what a lot of Russian families are like, then it'll be attractive to them. It will feel right. Inside cave, good, safe. Same too with Trump, same too with any fascist. And that's the problem. So you go to anywhere in the world, there'll be a fascist party. There'll be a right-wing party of some kind that uses the same rhetoric. Others, problems are not caused by wealth inequality, not caused by a lack of the art of the logos, a lack of the dialectic to address causes of problems and to rationally address them. That's not what problems are caused by. It's caused by people who look different than you. It's caused by immigrants. It's caused by the rich people not being rich enough. This sort of bullshit. The reason why it's so prevalent is we're at a level of human development where we have not yet moved into the art of the logos. So we're still able to be manipulated by groupthink. Inside cave good, that solution that no longer applies. Things that feel attractive. Why? Because that attraction is the cause of our pathologos. Our fundamental false beliefs about self, reality, the logos, and the art of the logos that we get from our childhood before we could ask questions. So we didn't learn it through reason, we learned it through appearance. Shadow, that's why it's called the shadow or the reflection of being, the reflection of the logos. So of course there are going to be people who are better at doing their injustice, and that will, if it reflects the majority of people in that culture, the kind of tyrant that's appealing to British cultures will be the kind of tyrant that parents looked like to children before they had the art of the logos. Trump is the kind of tyrant that appeals to 40% of Americans because, same thing. Before we had the art of the logos, what passed as truth and being, passed as wisdom and care, was that kind of vice, that kind of tyranny, that kind of shadow. So in other words, until we can evolve into the next stage of evolution, and of course if there are stages, we should be able to see it with the art of the logos according to a paradigm of the dialectic with self-o terms reflecting the self-logos. That can be verified in direct experience of being. In other words, if there's a paradigm for what we're learning, there should also be a paradigm for stages of human development, but also within us. That's why it is the mystical tradition. It's not a spiritual tradition, it's the, because it has the model, it has the paradigm. It's not count your breath for 40 years and hopefully you jump into this stage or that stage without understanding. No, it's like medicine. You have to understand the model so we can understand humanity and ourselves at that level. What level? Well, Socrates is saying the level where you have to now learn the art of the logos, which is fascinating. So all of these otherwise confusing problems, Socrates is saying it's so easy to understand, so simple. How else can he look 2,000 years into the future and describe our world, our society perfectly? How else could he do that without seeing the paradigm? And that's what we're talking about with leveling up. We have this noise. If you level up a character, you start to see the world through that leveled up skill. You see through your understanding. So Socrates, how could he predict our world 2,000 years ago? Because he can see through it. It's obvious. So the more we reflect, the more we read, the more we practice, the more we do the dialectic on these key terms we want to understand, the more we will see it as obvious. And it is obvious when we see it this way. And isn't it fascinating we're at this point of history where we have the text, we have the technology to share the reading of the text, and we have the technology to understand the nature of the world, or what's happening in the world, so that we can see, oh yeah, we have these problems. But we can read what Socrates is sharing, receiving from self, on how to understand and solve them. So we're at a part of history where we have what we need to solve our problems, globally and within ourselves. Actual spiritual psychotherapy, you might call it. And we have what we need to reach our destiny, to reach the higher states of mind. We have the technology to learn about Buddhism and Taoism, and we have this text to be able to recognize it within a greater paradigm. Isn't that cool? It doesn't have to be mysterious and too complicated for the layperson to understand. No gatekeeping here. It's for everyone to understand. Everyone can solve their problems and reach their highest destiny. And likewise, the more this is shared, we have what we need to solve human problems, prevent us from the fate of our extinction, and reach our utopian society and beyond. So if you're here watching this video, that's something to be puzzled about. Isn't it fascinating that we're at this point of history? Isn't that cool? And Socrates seems to be saying it all comes down to the art of the logos. That's the next stage. That's what you have to apply to your practice of spirituality. That's what you have to apply to your learning. That's what takes you from philomathesis, lover of learning, to philosophia, lover of wisdom, and maybe beyond to lover of phronesis. This is what purifies ourselves, purifies us from all human ills, as he calls it. Heal our soul and heal the world. This is what you need to escape the cycles of reincarnation. Reincarnate to a higher level with greater men who've completed their work and greater masters and gods and good daemons. We have what we need. Is it complicated? Nope. Can it be confusing? Yes, in a good way. To be puzzled and confused with a question is the conditions you need for that insight. To be comfortable with being confused, that's the game that we're in. because we know, because it's not a tragic confusion. A tragedy is where the main character doesn't see what they need to see and never does, and plays out the tragic implications of their problem. So if you study drama, we call that, they say that the hero plays out his tragic fate. The inevitable consequences of a certain false belief that he is ignorant to. But we don't have to live in a tragedy with the art logos, because it is entirely possible to verify for ourselves we are part of an intelligible and caring universe. In other words, hearing about the art of the logos, whether or not you've mastered it yet, is enough for you to realize, oh, it's okay to be puzzled and confused and have a question, because there is a possible answer. And being confused is part of it. It allows for that unexpected and wondrous answer, insight. It's okay to be puzzled and have a question, because having a question is to be on a quest. So, so that's where we're at. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that puzzling? Puzzling that we are at a stage where it's okay to have puzzles, it's important to have puzzles, but it doesn't have to be a tragic end, so long as we do as best as we can, aiming for excellence towards mastering what? And I've lost my sound effects. The art of the logos. Art of the logos. That's what we need to master. Well, that's amazing. That's blown my mind. I hope your mind is blown too. And on that note, let's jump into the text and see if we can see what we need to see about the art of the logos in how he addresses Cadmus, how he addresses Cebes' argument that we don't outlive our last jacket. In other words, this might be our last reincarnation. So not only are we going to learn about the soul and why necessarily it must be immortal, but we're going to learn about this art of the logos, the very thing we need to save the world, to save humanity. But more importantly, that's secondary. Socrates is saying, for you, to benefit you, it's an art you can use to benefit yourself. Greedy for the logos for self. So we're going to look at how Socrates does it. And one hypothesis we're taking with us is, well, first of all, we've already seen he uses mythology to, as a mnemonic device to categorize the argument so we can remember it. Harmonia was the previous argument, but he's going to ask a question, either where you're at or where you're stuck, which is where you're at on the ladder or where you're stuck. Either way of asking that is our hypothesis, will give us, because we're going to be somewhere in the middle. If, oh Lord. Okay, right, having some technical difficulties. Right, so that's what we're looking for. If, as we said before, here's our blackboard scene. Using our understanding of the dialectic so far, we have side A what it is and side A what it isn't. If you want to know what being is, you have to do a dialectic on what if being exists, what if it is. And of course, notice, the people who claim to be wise in our society, they say there's no reality, there's no logos, and there's no art. If there's no reality, you can't even do the dialectic. You can't even hypothesize what if being has an existence in being. Well, beauty has an existence in being because there's no reality. Like a staunch atheist will say, "Oh, no, when we die, there's no other realm other than the physical realm." But of course, we have to allow it to be. Even Parmenides said that at the start of Socrates' philosophical journey, you have to permit the ideas of real beings to be. Keep in mind your objections, define each one of those particular ideas. That's dianoia. But you also have to allow the idea, the aspect of each one of these real beings to always be of the self. This is the power of dialectic. So we have to allow there to be a being. And the ideas of the real beings to be. This is Socrates' first instructions to Parmenides' teacher. Parmenides, who was Socrates' teacher, his first instructions to what Socrates needs to do to overcome his difficulties and walk the path of philosophy. So, if it isn't, side A and side B, definition, demonstration, division, S and A, these are the four categories. But within those, can say what's true and what's false and what's true and false. Using those, we can understand the model that we're developing about the logos. Today, we talked about how the art of the logos is what we need to reach our destiny, what we need for the virtues, what we need to reach being. So we can say this is what's true. What's true? We can say, hey, the art of the logos, you need to understand this so you can understand its shadow. That's why it's on the ground. It's its shadow. Also, it doesn't go up. It's a stagnation. You are fated to repeat your problems unless you engage in this activity of the art of the logos. And so what does the shadow cause us? Well, it's the shadow of being. Today, we talked about how it's the image of beauty, image of wisdom. People cosplaying as knowing or wise when they yell on TV or when they punish someone or when they, however they act as a parent. Are they really the ideal? No. Why? Socrates is saying because these are exceptionally rare. Maybe it took Socrates his whole life to get here. So it's almost certain that our early teachers, our parental figures, were not this. But there'll be a key moment where they will cosplay the shadow of being. And this is also why it can be difficult to play this game. I mean, it's not difficult in itself. It's only difficult because we want to save the image of our loved ones as being good and beautiful. Because of that problem, inside cave good. The sorts of humans who evolved were the ones who did believe that the ruler of their tribe when we were cavemen was always good and never could be wrong, and we would defend them to the death. Those were the humans that survived. So what's the most triggering joke you can make? A yo mama joke. What do kids say on the playground? My dad can beat up your dad. What's that? Some irrational loyalty that your parent happens to be the one who was actually being, but it's not. It has the appearance of being. So this is the understanding needed for true psychotherapy, by the way. So it's the shadow of being, so it's false. It's the cause of our vices. See, vices isn't being on this ladder of virtue. If you're doing your best to desire the art of the logos, hold on to it with courage, use it in your planning, function with it at all times to be just, that's not vice. You're just climbing the good ladder. Vice is different. Vice is to master, like for temperance, to master some desires, to be mastered in order to play out this. I'm going to be disciplined so one day I get to punish my kids. So I get to be a job and be a tyrant in my job. I get to attack. So I'm not the one being attacked. I get to be the bully. And this is institutionalized. The second year college kids will beat up the first year because that's what happened to them. That kind of crap. I don't want to be the one being bullied, so I want to be the bullier. That's Peter's principle. Okay, this is vice. It feels true. Courage is to follow what the logo says is true, even though our feelings are not yet aligned with that. When our feelings are aligned, we have intuition. That's a higher dimensional thing to do with the dimension of being, which is a line of reflection for another day. But just know that fourth dimensional feeling is related to there, whereas what feels true. So you know, if you ever watch those YouTube videos where they talk to I don't know, some Trump supporter, and they say, oh, Trump is the best and he's the most virtuous, he's the most Jesus-like, and they'll say, well, what about all of the evidence? They will say, oh no, but it feels true. My religion feels true. My dear leader feels legitimate. Which can be frustrating for the rational among us. Early on when we learned philosophy, Zeno, who was Parmenides' student, when Socrates was 20, Zeno was 40, Parmenides was 60, so there's an interesting ratio there. But Zeno was the student of Parmenides when Socrates met Parmenides, and Zeno said, when I first learnt philosophy, and this is what happens to a lot of people, they become philonikos, lovers of contention, lovers of fighting. They want to argue. When they start to reason about their false religious beliefs, they want to go talk to other religious people and say, hey, surely this is absurd. Have you read this passage of the Bible? Or, how can all of the animals fit on Noah's Ark? Or how come you believe something with no evidence? Or this whole book is full of contradictions and the morality in the Bible is terrible. How can you think it's good morals? It doesn't get anywhere, because these people are waking up to reason, some level here, some level of the logos, whereas the people who are convinced by their religious belief, remember, belief, not understanding, not knowing, below that line, they didn't learn what they learned through understanding. It felt true. It was belief. It was the appearance of being, the shadow. So you get a lot of young people who are, or young in terms of new to philosophy, who start to learn the benefits of reason, and they want to fight against these people. And it can be funny, but also can be sad, because they're hitting their head against a brick wall, because they're speaking two different languages. One's a language of the logos, one's a language of their problem. And of course, there are some people who never get out of that. Like Richard Dawkins, for instance. I don't want to pick him out specifically, and I don't know where he's at now, but in the past, his rejection of that was so firm that it defined him. His contention towards that, because he started to learn reason and he was very good at it and could see the irrationality in religious beliefs, but it prevented him from going further and realizing, oh, these aren't the people speaking for truth of being. So if you're learning about God from these people, of course it's going to be wrong. But just because they're wrong doesn't mean Socrates is wrong. Or just because they're wrong doesn't mean the Logos is wrong. Or as we read in the text, just because these people let you down doesn't mean there is no sanity within all humans. And applied to the Logos, just because this Logos let you down and you suffered blows growing up religious or growing up in a religious community in England, doesn't mean there is no being, number one, there is no Logos, number two, and there is no artful use, number three. Socrates pointed out Richard Dawkins' problem 2,000 years ago. The question is, how would we communicate that to him? he would have to be open to this. He would have to be open to being wrong, to changing his mind. And unfortunately, the older we get and the more our career and our image of ourselves is tied to a certain way of being, the harder it is to be open to change. Socrates says, doesn't matter, do it anyway. This is not your only incarnation. It matters how you live. It's not too late to turn yourself around. Socrates was doing it to his very last breath. So, optimistic. Good news for us. So if these things represent what's true, the ladder up to being, the virtues, the art of the logos, destiny, this is what's true, this is what we want. Fate is the opposite of destiny. Shadow of being, the opposite of being. Feels true, I guess, would be opposite to intuition. When we are aligned with this, maybe. The virtue of phronesis. Socrates says, by the way, when you have phronesis and ousia, you have a kind of guide that the logos you're talking about is good for you. So maybe when we reach the being with the virtues and the art of the logos, we give birth to phronesis in a way that ousia, of course, means being. Phronesis is the highest virtue. So we have a feeling or an intuition that the kind of thing we're talking about is actually going to be helpful and beneficial. So that's the kind of feeling that simply feels true would be the shadow of. We could call that intuition. So, this is what's true, this is what's false. Most people are somewhere within this arc. Within 1 degree and 89 degrees of this right angle picture. So, and we can see these categories within the dialectic itself. Within each of these 4 categories, you can say what's true about something, what's false about something, and what's both true and false. This is what's true, this is what's false. What's both true and false is somewhere we are at as human beings. And of course, we wouldn't be here it would be irrational and unjust if we were all stuck, worthless. We wouldn't be here if we already had the perfection and purification and perfection of the soul. If we're already only on this ladder, necessarily by human beings, we will have a problem. We've got these 2 basic questions. This is what makes one reason why philosophy is the genuine spiritual tradition. If in order to meditate you need a question, you don't have to get a fake one from a guru, like what is moo? If a tree falls in the forest but nobody hears it, doesn't make a sound. These sort of questions that don't have an answer, so somebody gets focused on it, doesn't destroy the question by answering it. These trick questions, you don't need those because you have your own questions. You are naturally curious about your problem, and you're naturally curious about your destiny. So someone like Socrates doesn't have to give fake questions to his friends. He gives them real questions. And therefore, we're somewhere here. So if he's going to use an art of the logos in that way, as a true guru, he should be with, where are you at or where are you stuck? And of course, those aren't 2 different questions, really, because we're going to be somewhere. Where are you stuck? Well, I've reached this level of understanding of the argument here, but I have this block here, so I'm right there. Equally so, where are you stuck? I'm stuck at this part of the argument. Or I have this false belief, this childhood false belief about death, that's like the boogeyman, that I recognize is a false belief. So where you're at or where you're stuck is kind of the same question, because we're going to be here, necessarily as humans. So that's going to be our hypothesis when we jump in. Is Socrates going to ask him a question where you're at or where you're stuck? And is Cebes going to answer in some way that will allow us to judge? Part of the art of the logos is judging where you're at here. How trustworthy are you? And where should we start our dialectic? And even that question is contained within the dialectic. True, false, and both. True, false, and somewhere between both. So, recap. Let's jump into the text and see if we can see it there. Exciting stuff. So this is at the end where we were. Cebes says, it appears to me you will find a way to gain favor from the followers of Cadmus. So it sounds like he's representing the next argument with Cadmus, the last jacket argument. Because you have certainly dealt with the Logos about harmony in a wonderful way, almost as if beyond belief. So we're learning about what it's like to have the art of the Logos. This is how we would be. For when Simmias was speaking of his puzzles, I was very much wondering if anyone would be able to provide whatever was required for the Logos of self. And now it suddenly appeared to me in a marvelous way that the Logos of Harmonia could not sustain the first approach of your Logos. So notice, your Logos. And so surely then I would not be amazed if the Logos of Cadmus suffered the same fate. O good friend, do not boast, lest some jealousy be set in motion to overturn our destined Logos. Notice fate and destiny. He's worried about suffering fate, and Socrates is mentioning destiny. The destiny is tied to the Logos, right there. However, on one hand, surely then we can leave these matters to the care for the god. Okay, now I want to quickly see what that is in a different translation. So that puzzled me last time. You leave these matters to the care for the god, maybe the care of the god, I would say it should be. 95b. In the lobe. Do not be boastful, lest some evil eye put to rout the argument that is to come. That, however, is in the hands of the god. Yeah, I was right. It's in the hands of the god. Let us proceed in a Homeric fashion. Let us pierce right through the Logos at hand and see if there's anything that accords with what you say. Okay, this is the translator talking about Cadmus and giving some of his own thoughts. But surely the main point of what you say is that it is worth demonstrating that our soul is indeed immortal and indestructible, so that if a philosophic person who is about to die is supremely confident in the face of death that he will lead a better life in Hades than if they died while living a different vice way, it is not unintelligently confident and foolish in his confidence. So he's not being foolish to think living according. So we do the opposite. So we got to translate it. We have to play the game. So he's saying it's a lot of knots, which makes it stupid and hard to read sometimes. But it's not stupid. It's an activity. It should poke us. Doesn't it sound terrible to read? Then fix it. So demonstrate our soul is immortal and indestructible, so that a philosophical person who's about to die is supremely confident in the face of death that they will live a better life in the next world because they lived in a vice way. And this is They are being intelligently confident. So that's the opposites. So he said what it isn't, we have to do what it is. He's doing side B, we have to do side A. Notice, he's forcing us to do the dialectic whether we like it or not by phrasing it in these negatives. These irritating ways of talking where it's, is it not the case then he's, that he is not unintelligent, not unintentional. It's a double negative. Ugh. Yeah, no, of course it's annoying because he wants you to do the dialectic, which is side A and side B. So he's forcing us to do side A, what it is. Thus, it is worthwhile to reveal to the light of day why it is that the soul is mighty and a divine idea, and that she was even that way before we came to be human beings. Yet you say all this does not keep her from being immortal, but only reveals that the soul is long-lasting, and that soul existed at some time before, for an extraordinary amount of time, and that she knew and did many things. But for all that, she was not immortal. But her very entrance into a human body was the beginning of her destruction, just as if she were a disease. Entrance into a human body was the beginning of her destruction. Highlight. As if she were a disease. We can imagine people who think this way, or religions or cults even that talk about humanity being a disease. Famously, villains in movies call humanity a disease. And many religious cults or just cults say, oh, we have to purify the world from humanity. They're a disease. Being human is a disease on our soul, because look at how much injustice there is. Of course, hopefully we will say, no, we can turn it around. All we need to do is play the game, wake up to our true purpose here, love learning, love philosophy, love phronesis. And you do that by mastering the art of the logos. She would live that life in distress, and it would end, being destroyed in what we call death. Because soul's destruction comes from being human. Thus, you say that it surely makes no difference whether she enters a body once or many times, in regard to the fear in each of us indeed, for you say it is proper to be afraid. If one was smart, again, not unintelligent, we have to flip it. If someone was smart, they would be afraid of death, because they don't know, nor can they give proof that the soul is immortal. Is that what you say, O Cebes? And I deliberately repeat it often, in order that not any point escape us, so that you may add or subtract anything you wish. So that's where he's at. Is this where you're at, Cebes? Notice he represents his argument very well. He says, hey, yeah, maybe being human wears our soul down. And it's intelligent to fear death, because no one can prove that our soul is immortal, and no one can know it. So there's our two ideas. Knowing, knowledge, which is open only to philosophy, of course, and proof, which is the logos. So two of the three things that are rejected by people who claim to be knowers in our culture. There's no such thing as being, so you can't know what happens when you die. Nobody knows, it's a mystery. Ooh, look at all these limes I'm holding. That's the me. Okay? Now, of course, that doesn't really mesh with what Socrates is saying, that philosophy is the art and practice of dying, and you get there by entering a state of knowing called nous, so you can know what happens out of your body, because he says this is purification. It's also what we call death. So you are supposed to know death. That's part of living well. And not only that, he pointed out, by the way, if you really know something, shouldn't you be able to give a logos of it? And Cebes says, of all the things that we're interested in, beauty itself, justice itself, the nature of the afterlife, as soon as you die tomorrow, as soon as you're dead tomorrow because you're being killed by the state, no one will be able to give a good account. So knowing also requires the logos. To really have knowing, it's not just a near-death experience or a drug trip or a meditation experience. Also, you need logos for it to be a real spiritual, philosophical, or personal development tradition. So is that your case? No one can know, nous. No one can give proof, and the word there is actually logos. And so eidos is one word for knowing here. So eidos and logos. Knowing and logos. Is that where you're at? By the way, add or subtract anything. So yeah, he did open with where, as is where you're at. CB says, there is nothing at least that I at least want to add or subtract at the present moment. But this is what I mean. Cool. That's the gauntlet. Can Socrates use the art of the logos to dissuade us from this? And can we learn the art of the logos by playing along and looking carefully and reading carefully? Because we also want the art of the logos. Phaedo, who's our narrator, who was there. After that, Socrates was self-absorbed in reflection for a long time, contemplating, examining, considering about something. So, absorbed in the self, which is important because that's where the logos comes from apparently. And here's our idea of contemplation that we've been talking about today. That is what makes it. That's when eidos comes from. Contemplation. The separating of the soul from the body. So, then he said, Socrates, it is no thoughtless matter. Oh, goodness. Like the double opposites, they really get me. The double negatives. It is no thoughtless. Oh, well, couldn't you say it is a thoughtful matter? No, we have to do that. All right. It is no thoughtless matter that you seek, O Cebes, for the cause of generation and destruction needs to be wholly and thoroughly investigated. Now we can recognize generation and destruction, that's the kind of logos of the physical world. Everything is growing and destroying. And of course, those were that was one of the arguments for the immortality of the soul. That we had to, if there's generation and destruction, if that's a part of the physical world, then also that we see there is a dying, there must be a coming to be alive from somewhere. Thus I, if indeed you wish, will give to you my personal experience concerning cells of good. Thereafter, should something that I say may come to light useful to you, make use of it to persuade us of what you say, of that which you say. Interesting. And this is a bit different. He's going about a different way. So he's done some contemplation and reflection. He said, okay, this is the way forward. This is the key, the cause of generation and destruction. But I'm going to give you my personal experience. You look for something useful and then persuade us. Interesting. He's really encouraging him to play, to not just be a passive receiver of the logos arguments, but learn the art too. Let's see how it goes. Cebes, but I truly do indeed wish that. Oh, good. Listen then, says Socrates, as I tell you, O Cebes, for when I was young, I was in a strange way, as I was eager to possess that wisdom which they surely call the study of physics. For it appeared to me to be a splendid thing to know the causes of each reality. Through what does each thing come to be? And through what does it dissolve? And through what does it remain in existence? Okay? Yeah. Probably if you're in this channel, maybe you were interested in physics at some point of your life. Through what does everything come to be? Where did everything come from? Through what does it dissolve? What is it that's doing this dissolving that we can see? And does it remain in existence? Through what does it remain in existence? What causes things to stick together? What causes my coffee cup to stay a coffee cup into each different moment? Often, I myself changed up and down in the investigation with questions such as these. In the first place, at the time living creatures were formed, does it really happen when heat and cold bring about some decay, as some say? And does it happen through the blood, or through the air, or through fire? Or on one hand, is it through none of these, by which we have mind? Oh, okay. Now, I recognize Phrono. Phaedo, and there's our phronesis we're after. So let's copy that, highlight it, and find out what the actual word is. Because it's a variation of phronesis, and this is one of the two things we seek as philosophers. We seek being, or truth, and we seek phronomen. And phronomen means a frozen yogurt made out of humans. No. Phronomen. Oh, it's just phronesis. It's just a variation of phronesis. Right. Okay, cool. So, this is our one of the questions we're carrying. What the frig is phronesis? Because that's what we need. Interesting. So, through any of these physical things, through air, through blood, through fire, well, none of these that we have phronesis. On the other hand, if it is the brain which produces the perceptions of hearing and sight and of smell, and out of these memory comes to be, and opinion, and then out of memory and opinion, quietness takes hold. And out of this quietness, knowledge comes into being. And in turn, by investigating how these perish and what happens to things in heaven and on earth, in this way, finally I myself came to believe that this kind of investigation is naturally unsuited by being of no use. What the heck is he doing here? Well, so study of physics. This is where we all start, in our physical world, through our physical senses. And what happens in the physical world? Generation and destruction. He also adds a third term, which is usually neglected in physics. What helps it to remain? What keeps the laws laws? Okay, so so in physics we look at physical causes, because that's the game we're in. We're looking at the physical world, the things we can put in test tubes. So what do we look for in physics? Molecules, or back then, air, fire. Also, is it the brain that produces the senses? This is a common belief held by many people, especially physicists, that something of our mind, in particular phronesis, what the heck is that? Well, something about mind does mind come to be as a byproduct of the brain? Kind of like the harmony idea. But he goes beyond that. He goes, okay, what are the stages for getting wisdom? Well, you see things with your hearing and sight of smell, with your physical senses. And then you get the memory, because the things that we learn is through memory. You've never seen beauty. You've never seen equality. Therefore, if there's something that allows you to look at equal things and recognize them with your senses, you've never seen them from your senses. Therefore, you must have learnt them somewhere else. Therefore, you start with your physical senses, then you remember the ideas. Happy up until that point. We've already gone through this. The logos of learning is remembering. But from this memory comes opinion, doxa. That's physics. Opinions, theories. To explain why beauty exists among tree frogs, or equality exists among species of tree frogs, and so on. So memory and opinion. From there, quietness takes hold. So this is the shift from memory and opinion into quietness. So some sort of, even when he was young, he recognized some need for contemplation. Something from which you can access that higher dimension of cognitive thought. Out of this quietness, knowledge comes to being. So here's what he's been after, knowledge. So he started by seeking wisdom. Wisdom. So even when he was young, he recognized wisdom is somehow tied to knowledge in some way. It's of that which can be known. Now, so far we've got the virtue of wisdom, which is pursuing knowledge with the logos and using it for that part of the soul that thinks and plans. That gets upgraded into phronesis. But he looking at things in heaven and on earth. By heaven, I think here he means the sky. So the heavens up in the air. So looking at things up in the air and on the ground. This kind of investigation is not of any use. Therefore, I will give you sufficient proof of this. You can't get wisdom through science. For at the time I was severely blinded by this investigation, of what I clearly knew then, and also of what I knew before, as it appeared to both myself and to others. It was as if I had been unlearned. And even of those things I thought I knew before. About many other things, and specifically, why do humans grow? Since before this happened, I thought it was obvious to everyone that it was through eating and drinking that men grew. For on the one hand, whenever one adds flesh to flesh, from the food one eats, one adds bones to bones. And in this way, according to the same logos, according to the same line of reasoning, the other parts were also added to each other of the appropriate parts of the body. Then from having lesser mass at the time before, one has now become a greater mass. And in this way, the smaller human becomes greater. I thought in this way at the time. Does it not appear to you that I believed in a measured way? So, in a measured way. So, isn't this a kind of rational way of thinking? There's a certain measure to it, measured, harmonious or decent way, we might say. Cebes says, at least I do. Yeah, How do we get bigger? You eat stuff. And you get bigger. The more you eat, the bigger you get. Then please still consider the following. For I thought that my opinion was sufficient, that whenever a tall man appeared standing by a short man, he was taller by a head, and that a horse was taller than a horse in the same way. And even more manifestly clear than these examples indeed, it appeared to me that 10 was more than 8, because 2 had been added to it, and that 2 cubit length is larger than a cubit, because it surpasses it by half of itself. It's twice as big. Makes sense? Tall person is a foot taller. You could say he's a head taller. 10 is bigger than 8 because 2 has been added to it. Kind of makes sense, right? What then, says Cebes, surely then appears to you now about these things, about selves. Soc, by Zeus, I am so far from thinking that I know the cause of those events, of which I will not even allow myself to comment, regarding the meeting of neighbors with each other, and that when any one is added to one, neither the one to which the addition was made has become 2, or the one which was added, or the one added, and the one which was added to becomes 2 through addition of one to the other. What? For I wonder if... Wow! What? For I wonder if, on the one hand, when each of selves was separate from the other, each was accordingly one, and they were not at that time 2. But when they were brought near to one another, self becomes the cause of them being 2. So again, multiple readings, but let's take the first level of reading. So when we hear the word self, when they were brought near to each other, it became, so what's the subject of the sentence? Being brought near. When they were brought near to one another, it became the cause of their becoming 2. Nor indeed can I any longer be persuaded that when any one self is parted, that the self-parting has become in turn the cause of her being able to become 2. For she becomes opposite to the cause that became 2 at the time. For on the one hand, at that time, that came to be by bringing them near to each other, and by adding the one to the other. But now that happens because one is taken away and separated from the other. According to the mode of this investigation, neither can I still persuade myself that I indeed know through what one exists, or how anything else either becomes or perishes or remains in existence. So these are our 3. By one logos or method. But since I have yet another mixed up way of investigation that is familiar to me, in no way will I ever accept that method. Gobbledygook. Okay, we're going to have to read that in the other translation to see if we can make more sense of it. It sounds like he's looking at causes and being different from the effects. Let's keep reading. Let's read this section. Oh my goodness, he keeps going. okay, I was going to read the whole thing and then go back and read it in another text. But let's stop here and jump into the other translation and nail this part down before we go any further. So it's like we got some work ahead of us. Here we go. Can I zoom in a bit? That's good enough. Okay, let's read that section from a different translator, see if it reads differently. When I was young, Cebes, I was tremendously eager for the kind of wisdom which they call investigation of nature. I thought it was a glorious thing to know the causes of everything, why each thing comes into being, why it perishes, and why it exists. Notice, why? What we saw before for these three elements, come into being, perishing, and maintaining, it was it wasn't why these things happened, through what? So which one makes sense? Through what or why? I don't know. But if given two, take both with us and see what pans out. So why each thing comes into being. Of course, why is interesting because it adds the idea of destiny and fate that we've been talking about before. Why it perishes, why it exists. Oh, and also our learning, our incarnation, the destiny of man, the purpose of philosophy, the stakes to why we have problems, we're not doing our proper work, all those sort of things follow the why question. So, I was always unsettling myself with such questions as these. Do heat and cold, by a sort of fermentation, bring about the organization of animals, as some people say? Is it the blood, or air, or fire, by which we think? Or is none of these? And does the brain furnish the senses of hearing and sight and smell? Right? Very physics-like kind of way of thinking, isn't it? And do memory and opinion arise from these? And does knowledge come from memory and opinion in a state of rest? Fill your brain with your brain gives you sensations, physical sensations. That triggers some memories, but also you can develop personal opinions or opinions about the world. Fill your brain full of those opinions, and then have a little rest, contemplate, do this pose, maybe have a coffee. And then knowledge will come to you somehow. And again, I tried to find out how these things perish, and I investigated the phenomena of heaven and earth until finally I made up my mind that I was by nature totally unfitted for this kind of investigation. Interesting. I was unfitted. And the other reasoning, he said, this kind of investigation was naturally unsuited and being of no use. Interesting difference. Why we have the two texts.
Wow.
And I will give you sufficient proof of this. I was so completely blinded by these studies that I lost the knowledge that I, and others also, thought I had before. I forgot what I had formerly believed I knew about many things, and even about the cause of man's growth. For I had thought previously that it was plain to everyone that man grows through eating and drinking. For when from food he eats, flesh is added to his flesh, and bones to his bones. And in the same way, the appropriate thing is added to each of his other parts. Spleen is added to spleen. Kidney is added to kidney. Thus, the small bulk becomes greater and a small man large. That is what I used to think. Doesn't that sound reasonable to you? Yes, said Cebes. Now listen to this, too. I thought I was sure enough when I saw a tall man standing by a short one, that he was, say, taller by a head than the other, and that one horse was larger by a head than another horse. And to mention still clearer things than those, I thought 10 was more than 8 because 2 had been added to the 8. And I thought a 2-cubit rule was longer than a 1-cubit rule because it exceeded it by half its length. Now, what's he asking for? Causes. So maybe this is why Y works better. He wants causes. Wants the causes of coming to be, decaying, and maintaining in our physical world. And he's identifying the causes as that which you add. If you grow bigger by eating food, the cause is the food. If somebody is taller, the cause of their taller is being ahead of length. If 10 is greater than 8, its cause is 2. So he's looking at a physical thing, or a number that is added. He's saying that's the cause of differences. Okay, he's looking for causes, which is kind of what we do in philosophy. But maybe he's identifying that progression. He says, look, we all start, earlier in the text, he said we all start looking through our senses. You can be ruled by your desire part of your soul and want to get rich. The medium part of your soul, your outward seeking and want to get famous. Or the smallest part of your soul, which is the greatest, your reasoning part, and become a lover of learning. Now, if you're a lover of learning, you start through the senses, and you can only start to remember through the physical senses. You have to see 2 equal sticks to start remembering and thinking about equal itself. You have to see beautiful things to start wondering and then start the process of remembering beauty itself. But how do you go from beautiful things to beauty itself? Well, that's the progression from lover of learning, philomathesis, to lover of wisdom, because wisdom is somehow directed towards being. How do we get from the physical to being? Well, one way of answering that question is cause. What is the cause of the many equal sticks? What is the cause of the many beautiful things? So he was asking this question even as a newbie. And in our society, even today, when we want to find out what's the cause of growing, decaying, and maintaining, usually what's offered is physics. So maybe he's describing what might be that transition from lover of learning to lover of philosophy. Maybe. But we can see causes is what he's after. What do you think about these things now, says Cebes. By Zeus, said Socrates, I am far from thinking that I know the cause, there we go, of any of these things. I, who do not even dare to say, when one is added to one, whether the one which was added was, whether the one to which the addition was made has become 2, or the one which was added, or the one which was added and the one to which it was added became 2 by the addition of each of the other. So when you got 2 things, You got a 1 over here, and then you add 1 to it. Does this one become 2? Or does this one become 2? Or do they both become 2? That's his puzzle. I think it is wonderful that when each of them was separate from one another, each was 1. And they were not then 2. And when they were brought near each other, this juxtaposition was the cause of them becoming 2. He's identified what he thinks is a cause. A juxtaposition. Now, that is a funny word, juxtaposition. Let's find it in the other text. When they were brought near to each other, self became the cause of their becoming 2. So the word is brought near. Juxtaposition, I guess, is a fancy old English word. So they were both 1 and now they're becoming 2 by being brought near. And I cannot yet believe that if one actually... We have this game where if it hangs on a keyword, we look it up for ourselves. So the word is here. Let's copy it and nail it down for our own selves. So it was this one here. To be brought near. We paste that in here. It gives us this word. We Google Translate it. Appliciasan. Appliciasan. Appliciasan is bring near. Okay, yeah. Proximity. Good, good, good. Okay. Brought near works. So juxtaposition is a funny way of translating to be brought near. Now let's go back to this one. And I cannot yet believe that if one is divided, the division causes it to become 2. For this is the opposite of the cause which produced 2 in the former case. For then 2 arose because one was brought near and added to the other one. And now because one is removed and separated from each other. Okay. Right, okay, so by bringing them near each other, all of a sudden what was 1 is 2. Now they are one group of 2. Now they're being divided into 2 parts by moving them away. Now they're 2 different things. So in one sense, they were made 2 by bringing them close, because now you call it 2. But now if you divide them up into 2 different things, you've got 2 ones. But they were then gone from one thing to 2 things by moving them away from each other. So you made them 2 by bringing them near. Now you're making them 2 by separating them apart. How can you get 2 in that way? How can these opposites be the cause of 2-ness? I no longer believe that I know by this method even how one is generated, or, in a word, how anything is generated, or destroyed, or exists. And I no longer admit this method, but have another, confused way of my own. And one day so now that's where we are now. Now, confused way of my own, he said was... right, taken away and separated. So yeah, so we're right. So taken away and separated, the opposite of bringing them together. He has another mixed up way of his own. So what is his special way? Let's jump back into the other reading. This is going well. Kind of a good flow we've got here. Reading the this translation, and then jumping over to the Baba for the specific terms. Then one day I heard a man reading from a book, as he said, by Anaxagoras. Right? Anaxagoras wrote Harry Potter, I think. That it is the mind. That's a dumb joke. Pretend I didn't say that. That it is the mind that arranges and causes all things. I was pleased with this theory of cause. And it seemed to me to be somehow right, that the mind should be the cause of all things. And I thought, if this is so, the mind in arranging things arranges everything and establishes each thing as it is best for it to be. Okay, so here is the idea of justice being brought in. To arrange it, establish it the best for it to be. So if anyone wishes to find the cause of generation or destruction or existence of a particular thing, he must find out what sort of existence or passive state of any kind or activity is best for it. Interesting. And therefore, in respect to that particular thing, and the other things too, a man need examine nothing but what is best and most excellent. Wow. That's cool, because we have been talking about one of the criteria for being a philosopher is... Let's bring up the blackboard. One of the theories we've been playing with is, hypotheses we've been playing with is, to be a philosopher, there's a bunch of stuff you have to do. To be an adventurer.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Where's our picture of our dude? There he is. Look for the key terms, look for patterns and all that sort of stuff. Question sack, hypothesis sack. Reflect on yourself, turn yourself around. Seeking excellence. You have to do it with seeking excellence. Otherwise, you can settle or give up. Or be happy with opinions and prejudices and what is attractive, but not what is true. So we've been carrying this with us for a very long time. And now we can see something of that nature in what we're reading, which is cool. Let's jump back into it. So, what's the cause of things being as they are? Is it adding and dividing? Which is a very mindless activity, right? Very physical. If there are physical things in the world, is it just pushing them together? Now, we might be able to recognize this way of thinking as one of Parmenides' hypotheses. Because Parmenides' hypotheses are 8 levels and 1 extra one. So 9 in total, that represent all the possible ways of thinking about things. So all the levels of understanding and levels of insight or spiritual experiences, which is 8, 4 if it is, 4 if it isn't. That's the dialectic. So when we get back into the Parmenides, that's a bit of a teaser. If we are learning what the universal paradigm of being through logos, then the dialectic, that can be used artfully to benefit. If there is that universal thing that is denied by those who claim to be wise by just contradicting everything, but those things that are necessary for our human quest, then it would also apply to ways of thinking about reality. So Socrates was at a certain level of learning, of development, where he thought, oh, okay, what makes 2 2? Adding 1 to 1. But also, hang on a second, if I've got a pair and I separate that, now I don't have a pair anymore, I just got 2 different things. Now there's 1 pair was made 2. uh-oh, I made 2 by separating it apart, and before I made 2 by bringing it together. Ah, this is not a good enough cause. Then some dude was reading a book by Anaxagoras, who wrote the Born series, I think, who said that the mind arranges and causes all things. Okay, I flunked out with the Harry Potter joke before. I thought I'd swing again, and it was a miss. And then you can go. Oh, no, it was a win, so I'll take it. I meant to hit the other button. I was pleased with this theory of cause, because it brings in the idea that the cause of things is the way that they should be. So if we really want to find the cause of generation or destruction of a particular or existence, then we must what existence or state or activity is best for it. So you have to look for what is best and most excellent. For then he will necessarily know what is inferior, since the science of both is the same. Right? We talked about that before. The art of medicine, you have to know a healthy body so you can recognize the sickness body. You have to, for society and for our souls, we have to know the art of the logos so we can recognize the shadow of it. Same thing to solve problems and reach excellence. So again, what's best and most excellent? Well, that would be the art of the logos, it seems. As I considered these things, I was delighted to think that I had found in Anaxagoras a teacher of cause, of the cause of things, quite to my mind. And I thought he would tell me whether the earth is round, is flat or round. And when he had told me that, would go on to explain the cause and the necessity of it. Interesting. So this is our idea of necessity. Now, one of our questions is what should change our mind when we go through a dialectic? Well, dialectic is following the progression of causes. And also, there has to be a necessity and beauty to the argument. Necessity seems to be, was one of our questions, because beauty we've already been talked about. There's a beauty to the argument, but a certain necessity in the arguments we go through in the dialectic. So we want to know this because we want to know the art of the logos. What should we be looking for in the dialectic to change our mind, to prove something to be legitimate or not? Necessity. So maybe necessity is tied to what is best and most excellent. Maybe. Let's keep reading and take that hypothesis with us in our back pockets. He would tell me the nature of the best and why it is best for the earth to be as it is. Ah, interesting. And if he said the earth was in the center, he would proceed to show that it is best for it to be in the center. And I had made up my mind that if he made those things clear to me, I would no longer yearn for any other kind of cause. And I had determined that I would find out in the same way about the sun and the moon and the other stars, their relative speed, their revolutions, and their other changes, and why the active or passive condition of each of them is for the best. Why they are what they are passively, and why they revolve in the way that they do, active. So what's the cause? It's best for them to be that way. Interesting. Notice you can only ask this question, what is best and most excellent, if you have a mind that arranges. Notice the game has been leveled up. It's not just mushing things together or knocking them apart. A basic physics. And even physics, they're at the level now where they recognize there's a necessity for mind in their theories, but Socrates was seeing it even back then. Okay, there's a necessity. That the active or passive condition of each of them is for the best. So some ideal that is governing, that the mind is arranging it according to. Okay? Like we might say a blueprint of what's best. But of course, not blueprint, we're talking about a paradigm of what's best for the universe that mind is using to arrange. So that is a cause. That's a greater cause than even the arranger. Interesting. So by the way, we've got a few causes on the table now. We've got the mind that arranges. We've got the things being arranged. So these are two different causes, but we have the idea of what is best and most excellent for all things. So that's a different kind of cause. And Socrates is saying, hey, this standard of what is best and most excellent is the greater cause. That's the cause I really want. Not adding and subtracting, because there's someone doing that mind. And not even that mind that's adding and subtracting things. What is that looking at for the standard? Interesting way of thinking. So good on you, young Socrates. You are a fine young chap.
Allow me to introduce myself. I am Jarvis.
Okay, I haven't pressed that button in a while. I did not expect that one to be there. We're not clapping for you, Jarvis. We're clapping for Socrates.
Importing all preferences from home interface.
No, Jarvis, not you.
Allow me to introduce myself. I am Jarvis.
Jarvis. That's my AI named Jarvis. And that's a goat. Okay. What is best for each of them? For I never imagined that when he said they were ordered by intelligence, he would introduce any other cause for these things than that it is best for them to be as they are. This is the cause he's looking for. So I thought when he assigned the cause of each thing and of all things in common, he would go on and explain what is best for each and what is good. Whoa, now he's talking about good. He's gone from, so this is a key idea in philosophy, the good. And what is good for all in common. So what's best for each individual and good for the whole. So we've been kind of talking about that, what's good for us individually as our souls, but also we can reflect that to the whole of humanity. What's best for us, the art of the logos, what's good for us in common, for us all to be pursuing the logos and using that as our model or standard or paradigm that we arrange our society according to. Interesting. Good thing we've been reflecting what we're learning to our everyday lives, demonstrating what we're defining, because now we can see Socrates helping us to see more clearly what we've been wondering about for our world and kind of verifying it or giving us a good thumbs up. We're on the right track. So let's keep going. Best for each and good for the whole in common, all in common. I prized my hopes very highly, and I seized the books very eagerly and read them as fast as I could, and that I might know as fast as I could about the best and the worst. Okay, pretty cool. We're seeing young Socrates trying to figure out how to find the cause of things and how to learn. So let's jump into our Balboa translation to see if there are any key self-er terms or key terms themselves relative to the text? Are there any key terms that stand out that we missed? Okay, because we need the key terms. The other translation might be a bit more fun to read, but we need the Balboa translation to actually put on our Sherlock Holmes hats and solve the puzzles. So, same passage. Then on the one hand, once upon hearing someone read, as he said, from a book of Anaxagoras, right? Anaxagoras was the author who wrote the Gilmore Girls fan fiction, who proclaims that it is through mind that the cosmos is ordered. Interesting, cosmos. Let's keep going. And the cause of all. I was delighted with this cause. Okay, let's highlight through mind, cosmos is ordered. And let's highlight the key term, the cause of all. Let's give it green. I was delighted with this cause, and in some way it appeared to me to contain the correct way. That the mind is the cause of all. Interesting. And I was led to believe that if this was in this way, that if the mind orders, then surely it would have to direct everything and arrange each and everything in the best way that this should be in. Again, the best way. There's an ideal at work here. If then one wished to find the cause of each thing, in what way it comes to be or perishes or remains in existence. So those are the three. If it would necessarily it would be necessary to discover this about self. What is the best way for self to be? Or acted upon in any way by another? Or for self to act? So be acted upon, or itself acting. Surely then out of this logos, what is either excellent or best, and out of no other is it proper for humans to investigate. Right? If the cause of things to be the way they are is because it's most excellent and best for them to be that way, then we need to find out what the heck that is. That's where our pursuit of causes or our love of learning should lead us. Thus, this same self-logos must necessarily also recognize that which is inferior. For selves belong to the same knowledge. All right, we've already seen that. To know what's good, you also recognize what's not the good, what's the inferior. And we actually talked about that today with using the dialectic to judge. So our judgment with the art of the logos is to recognize that. Where is it? So we recognize today that right. So this is what's true. Socrates is saying that's what's excellent or best, but the same art of the logos is needed to recognize that which is the worst or which is false. So all of those things. So the art of the logos, which is Socrates is wanting to pass on to us, is needed to recognize what's good, true, destiny, the virtues, But also it's the same knowledge of this that allows you to see its shadow, to understand what our fate is, what the shadow of being is, what feels true but isn't, our vices or what's false. And everybody is somewhere, well, most people are somewhere between these extremes. Right? From the chat, I have a question. What's the difference between a soul, a spirit, and a ghost? Which one is trapped in my grandmother's piano? Well, what sort of music does your grandmother's piano play when nobody's in the room? Because there might be a cat trapped underneath the little ceiling of the piano in there. That might be what's causing the noise. Did you used to have a cat? So in this game, we have mentioned ghost stories. Socrates has talked about... So we want to know whether our soul is immortal. And to understand the soul, we can understand the soul as a kind of a term representing the wholeness of our psyche, our functioning. So there's a part within us that that's not physical, but desires inwardly, that wants to eat sandwiches. There's a part that we have within our psyche that functions to want to move outwardly. We want to go do stuff in the world. And there's a part of our soul that reasons and plans. So if we recognize we have these aspects within us, like inwardly, you might want a sandwich. Outwardly, you might, something brought you to tune into this podcast today. And they're something that reasons. Now, so if you take all these three as a whole, we can call that the soul. Now, the virtues are to do with how the soul is arranged. Are you someone who's governed by this? So you're like this, like an upside down snowman. Your desire part of your soul rules you and you seek riches. Are you someone who is motivated by this? This is the ruling part of your soul. You want to get famous. You're outwardly moving. Honor or fame. So this is a lover of riches, philokrimatos. This is a lover of fame, philotimos in the Greek. And this is a lover of learning. If you're motivated by this part, philomathesis. So the soul is the name for the whole of these psychic functions. And in the Phaedo, we're reading Socrates say, hey, by the way, if you want to know what philosophy is, it's the art and practice of death and dying. You can separate this from your physical body. And that's practicing philosophy properly. Because this is a kind of purification from our ignorance. But it also allows you to take your soul and experience the realm of being. Because there's a physical world that we see with our senses. But we also have a sense called ousia that has the ability, when you separate your soul, you collect it together from all parts. You can experience the world that existed before the physical world. So we could call it metaphysics. Compared to the physical world, or we can call it being in comparison to the realm of becoming. In the world of becoming, there is changes. There's growth and decay, and there's a kind of, in the middle between growing and decaying in the physical world, there's a kind of maintaining. And this is where we start with our learning. If you're not someone chasing riches, so you're studying business at school, or you're chasing fame, you want to become Instagram famous. But if you're loving learning, usually you start by examining the world of becoming. That's where Socrates is. The soul looks like a snowman. Doesn't play music, just unable to learn it. Oh, interesting. The ghost that plays is mad at you or something. or the cat that's trapped underneath is mad at you for not feeding it for so long. So Socrates is talking about his youth. That's what we're reading now. He wanted to understand the cause of things. Why? Let's get rid of this. What's the cause of things in our physical world growing? Let's move it over here a little bit. What's the growth, decay, and between those, there's a kind of maintaining for a while. Everything in our world is growing, decaying, and for a little bit maintains its existence for a while. Everything in our physical world of the senses. So he wants to know what's the cause of that. So we could say, oh, he's not motivated by riches. He's not studying to get rich. He's not studying to get famous. He's the well-balanced snowman. This is a kind of virtue, by the way. The virtues, there are 4 virtues in philosophy, but they pretty much come down to, can you harmonize yourself so the best part of your soul rules the others? So you're not motivated by your desires. You live to just get wasted, or you live to eat lots of cake. You're not motivated by this part of your soul. What you do isn't so you can get famous. But what you seek outwardly and what you want for yourself is the same thing that your reasoning wants. Then you're kind of balanced. You're kind of balanced within yourself. You can unify yourself. Now, what starts as a lover of learning, as Socrates is, becomes when you realize, hang on a second, these things in this physical world, for them to be as they are, there has to be a greater cause that's non-physical, metaphysics. Now you've turned your attention away from your physical senses to the realm of being. That's meditation. That's a kind of meditation. Now Socrates' idea of philosophy is collecting yourself away from your senses, because the more you seek pleasures and pains of your physical body, the more you imprison yourself, self-imprisonment. You nail your soul to the body. And that's a kind of nurturing. If you nurture your soul, because if you think pleasures and pains of your physical world are most real, that's a kind of nurturing that's going to affect your reincarnation. So you mentioned ghosts. He says, hey, we tell ghost stories about people. You go to graveyards, and there are these ghosts there because they are so attached to the physical world that they can't even leave. They can't leave this physical plane. That's kind of like us and the cause for our reincarnation. If you think what's most real is in your physical senses, and you go around chasing your desires, you'll come back as a donkey. If you want to act as a tyrant in the world, pursuing your outward desires, you can come back as a wolf or an eagle or something. If you're pretty well ordered and you have kind of a virtuous soul, but without philosophy, then you might come back as a bee or an ant, somewhere which is like, has community, is kind of social. But we want to reach the higher plane of existence. That's where Socrates says he's going after he dies. That means we have to nurture our soul in a different way, which means we have to progress from a lover of learning, this part of our soul, like a good snowman, to realize, hang on a second, I see examples of beautiful things, adjectives, a beautiful dog, a beautiful person, a beautiful sunset. These are examples. Beauty as an adjective. But for there to be many examples, there has to be a cause. What is beauty itself as a noun? What caused those many things? Now you're asking a question about being. This is why Socrates calls learning remembering. When you see a beautiful thing with your senses, you've never seen beauty itself before, then what are you doing? How are you recognizing beauty? If you see 2 sticks on the ground, are they kind of equal to each other? Look closer, they're not exactly equal. Where did you get the idea of equality from? Therefore, if you can recognize or remember things that's triggered through your physical senses, we ask the question, where did we learn those things themselves? Therefore, necessarily, our soul had to exist prior to our physical incarnation as a human. Therefore, that gives us a knowledge of all of those beings. So beauty, justice, equality. There's a whole list of things that we learn in philosophy, that we learn. By the way, philosophy is just reading these texts and piecing together the puzzles. It's like playing the best video game or the best Sherlock Holmes novel. It's just these books that we read from Plato, from Socrates, really. We get a whole bunch of terms like beauty, equality, equal, greater and lesser, sameness, different. All these things that we require for our thinking had to exist before in the realm of being. That our soul was the same as, was united with, before we got reincarnated. So now we've gone from a lover of learning to a lover of wisdom. That's one of the virtues. Philosophia means lover of wisdom. Now you're a lover of wisdom. You're not, and you want to collect yourself away from your physical body. People who are looking through their senses, that's where our problems come from. That's where our divisions and conflict come from. The back and forth of opposites, growth and decay, rich and poor. My success is dependent on me beating the other team. This competitive back and forth, get what you can, get rich and die trying kind of crap is the cause of all human problems, but also the cause of our internal problems. Because all the things we actually seek are things that are good. You want to eat a good sandwich. You want to, have good things for yourself inwardly. You want to be well known for doing good activities, for being a true good person. Also, you seek to understand, to unify you want to understand the truth about reality. All of those things, the good that you want, the truth that you seek, or a oneness of understanding, you can't get in your physical senses. You're always going to fall short. You're always going to be lacking, like a ghost. A ghost is sad because they're always in need. Got a big belly because they're never satisfied. But if you realize this, you can go, oh, hang on a second. All humans, all physical things, all things seek being, because that's where goodness itself is, beauty itself is, truth itself is, oneness itself is. And that's the object of knowledge. So when you're understanding the physical world, you're in the level of opinions based on your senses. When you direct your understanding to this, then you have dianoia, which is a Greek word that we need to introduce, which means understanding directed towards being. When you can actually pull this stunt off, which is what all yogas pretty much come down to this. Separating the soul from the body in whatever methods the particular yoga has. But our yoga is a yoga of understanding, dianoia. The pattern that we understand is called the logos. Again, a Greek word that we don't have in English until now. That's why this quest that Socrates is leaving us to do, the Phaedo is his last day on earth. He wants to pass on something, pass on his superpower, pass on his greatest quirk. We can only pick it up now, because only now do we have a translation with the actual Greek. And if this is a precisely written adventure text that requires us to solve puzzles, only now do we have what we need to awaken what philosophy really is. And Socrates says, by the way, if you don't do this, you're going to end up in a world where people are going to claim they have wisdom, claim they are the ones who've understood things, and what they're really going to be doing is just contradicting the logos, what we would call haters. or like the talking heads that we see on the news that just yell at each other and they don't actually contribute to anything, like the Republicans. They don't actually do anything, they just hate everything. They will say, oh, what makes me the most wise is I am going to claim there is no realm of being. And there is no understandable pattern that we can all unify together. So we can just have our own personal opinions that we fight and kill each other over. Our personal traditions. You're a Buddhist, I'm a Taoist. You're a Christian, I'm a Muslim. You're a Republican, I'm a Democrat. All that crap. There is no being, ultimate reality, that is knowable, by the way. That experience of knowing that happens when you perfect your dianoia is called nous. Again, we don't have that word. One of the other reasons why we can only start to play this game now. So dianoia. They'll say there's no logos, there's no objective, real understanding. There is no ultimate reality that we can experience in nous. All you can do is have beliefs because all we know is through our senses. Right? Wrong. And I will also say, there's no art. There's no skillful use of dianoia, nous, logos directed towards being that can be used to help people, other humans, who start looking through their senses, but have to become aware that they have a soul, and have to become aware that the soul can be separated, have to be told that there is such a thing as dianoia and nous, because it ain't in the English language, it ain't in the Latin tradition that modern philosophy follows. So modern philosophy that you learn at school is the opposite of philosophy. That's a great problem we have to overcome. But also someone who can guide you to loving learning, to loving wisdom, realizing that all of these particular things, the growth and the decay and the maintaining of our physical world, had a more primary cause in being. And that's what we need to seek. And includes a paradigm or model for our excellence, and also its shadow is the cause of our problems. So Socrates is giving us something called the art of the logos, which would be, he calls it the only actual spiritual tradition. Many are the people who carry staffs and claim to be spiritual, but this is the only understanding, knowable, verifiable, and can be used artfully to benefit other people system of understanding all of the levels of growth towards complete enlightenment. Also, it's the only it's the model for philosophy. But as it's the model for excellence of thought or philosophy, it also is the model for its shadow or its corruption. So you can see the excellence and you can see the problems. This is the art of the logos. This is what we need for anybody who wants to climb the ladder of their personal growth. And that ladder has two rungs, our understanding, but it's not dry. Philosophy isn't dull. You don't learn about there being an immortal soul and just like, oh, that's cool, back to my video games. You want to experience it. If the realm of being has beauty itself, the ultimate of beauty, you want to get there. It's what kicks ass. It's the greatest experience. In fact, the Taoists think that it's enlightenment. They like the logos, and there's some problems with that, but problems we can understand if we learn the art. So the art allows you to heal sickness, and like a doctor uses medicine to heal sickness, but also a personal trainer takes that healthy body and reaches the excellence. And Socrates is saying, this is what I need to pass on before I die. Because if you just believe me about the soul being immortal, then some joker is going to come along and he's going to use mythology that you're familiar with, and he will say, actually, the soul is kind of a byproduct of the brain. So the soul doesn't exist after you die. When you die, you're worm food, really. That's going to sound true. And we're going to feel betrayed by the logos. And we won't blame our lack of the art of the logos to think for ourselves and see the problems, whereas it's excellence and whereas it's problem. We're going to think maybe there is no understanding. And if there's no understanding, maybe there's no reality. Maybe it's all garbage. Socrates says that's the greatest defect of the soul. So, for us to prevent that greatest defect, for us to have a better incarnation, for us to experience death while we're alive, so we can know what it's like, and so we can verify our understanding, for us to know how to climb that ladder and in our perfection, but also purify ourselves, heal our illnesses. For all these reasons, we're learning the art of the logos. That's where we are in the text. And now, Socrates is explaining from his personal experience where he started. He started looking through his senses. He noticed there were physical things, and he wanted to know the cause of them. He said, look, if I have 2 coins, or like two stones, there's 1 stone. If I add another stone to it, I've now got 2. What was the cause of 2-ness? Well, a physics person would say, oh, you just added 1. It's addition. That's the cause. You know, hang on a second. So now I've got a pair of stones. I've got 1 pair. If I separate, now I've got 2 different stones. What's the cause of that 2 different stones? Oh, separation. Hang on a second. Addition caused 2 before. Now subtraction is causing 2? That doesn't make sense. There's got to be a... you can't understand things like 2 and the cause of 2 just by adding and subtracting things in the physical world with your physical senses. Doesn't make sense. And then he said he came across a guy named... funny name. Came across a guy named... Came across a guy named... some dude who was reading a book by a guy named Anaxagoras. And he wrote the Twilight book series. So Socrates, 2,500 years ago, came across this guy reading a book by Anaxagoras, who said it's the mind that orders things. So that adds a whole different level. Whoops. So the idea of mind being the cause... what's going on? Yeah. The idea of mind being the cause opens Socrates up to make a journey from this physical world of looking for causes to nous, because another word for nous or being is mind itself or self-mind. So that simple idea, mind is the cause, opens Socrates up to the potential to move from lover of learning, being motivated by that part of the soul, to lover of wisdom, philosopher, philosophia, philomathesis. You remember that because people who love learning likes to make their own math theses about maths, mathesis, to lover of wisdom. That's the potential. Now, we haven't seen if he gets there or how he gets there, but that's what he's opening himself up to, maybe, with just this idea that there is something called mind that is the cause. Now, it's so important because we're talking about how we start there. So hopefully, Socrates will show us how he got from this world of becoming, studying physics, to maybe becoming a philosopher. Because he's saying we need to do this most of all. This will be what solves human problems, what we need for our personal development, what we need to purify our soul, what we need to solve our problems, what we need to reach our excellence. It's needed in the art of the dialectic, and it's needed for us to do our work here and reincarnate and not be a ghost stuck in the piano of I Regret Jumping, who's joined us in the chat. We don't want to be stuck to the physical world thinking that's most real and get trapped as a ghost, not able to move on to the higher dimensions of reality. Because Socrates says, if you're a true philosopher, you'd want to follow me where I'm going as quick as possible. So that's the stakes of Socrates' own personal story, of where he started in learning and where he can potentially go, because that can help us. On that bombshell, and on that cliffhanger, thank you for joining me, and I hope you join me next time. Feel free to join me on chat, like our friend did today. Follow on YouTube. You can watch those videos on YouTube. You can join the Discord if you like. There should be a link below. And if the Patreon is up, if you'd like to support the Patreon, or if you have any ideas for different sorts of content that you think would be great to help in this quest, feel free to add suggestions and we can add them to Patreon. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you next time.